evening, mi gente. This is Collazo, the host and founder of Bomba Live, Found in Translation Simulcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Found in Translation stacks truth about politics and today's hottest issues. Con sabor boricua. Of course, Bomba Live is the perpetual Puerto Rican celebration. Again, this is your Collazo. And when you're 48 days from the biggest election of our lifetimes, there's no other cause but my political mentor, Democratic strategist, and the most important Puerto Rican in college football, Abe Amoros. Abraham, buenas noches, hermano.
Buenas noches, mi hermano. Saludos to you and our entire family, our live audience on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, as well as our podcast audiences on iTunes, Spotify, and all other audio digital platforms. And a special shout out to our radio listeners on WPPM 106.5 FM in Philadelphia, hashtag People Powered Media. Good to be with you.
No question about it, man. And when you're Latinos from the Keystone State, we get every 4 years, we get a lot better looking, we get a lot more calls from our chums. And that's going to be an ongoing theme of this conversation around how the Latino vote, and particularly the Puerto Rican vote in communities like Florida and Pennsylvania and some of these critical swing states to our democracy are coming to play. Later on in the show, in a few minutes, we're going to have one of the authorities on Puerto Rico policy and issues related to Puerto Rico and the diaspora. Federico DeJesus is going to be calling in from Washington, D.C. And I was blessed and honored. Talk about getting into the nitty-gritty of the Latino vote. Y'all need to take out your pens and for your notes on this episode, because later on the show, an interview that was taped earlier today with Carlos Odio from Equis Lab, they're doing the critical analysis of the Latino vote coast to coast. But Carlos, being one of our great progressive Cuban-American political strategists, has a keen, acute knowledge of what's going on with the Florida dynamic. Of course, that includes the Puerto Rican community, the Cuban community, and the non-Puerto Rican Cubans, which is actually, Abe, projected to be over 40% of the Latino electorate this cycle. So all of our Dominicanos, Colombians, Nicaraguenses, they're going to have a big say in who the next president is. But I know, Abe, that, let me ask you a question, Abe. Abe, you have so many titles. I forgot to mention, besides being very powerful in college sports, but that's another story for another time. I'm looking through, I get an email, an announcement from the Biden campaign that my dear friend, I had many friends on the list, Abe Amoros, is one of the chairs of the Latino Leadership Council for the Biden-Harris campaign in Pennsylvania. Abe, can you share a little bit about this wonderful news?
Yes, I had a wonderful discussion with Manny Guzman, who is the coordinator for the Latinx communities in Pennsylvania.
Our young fella, future state rep.
Future state representative, up-and-comer. I have a lot of respect for him. He has a work ethic that is absolutely amazing. What he did in the primary to win that race was just exemplary. I'm very proud of him. So, look, we only have 47 days, Ralph. We got 47 days left, and we've got to bring our people to the table. They can make the difference in Pennsylvania, not just in Philadelphia, but along the Route 222 corridor, those third-class cities in Pennsylvania. They're untapped in terms of resources in our brown communities, and our vote matters. In fact, this is the biggest election of our lifetime, bar none. I know that's said every year, Ralph, but this year is different.
It's not just about the direction of our country. It's about whether we are going to have a democracy or we are leading to an authoritarian state, which we already are on sort of a lightweight level with this administration. And particularly, I think historically, it's going to be seen as the worst of all the terrible actors, besides his president, our shameful Attorney General, William Barr, who is the wild card going into this electoral season. Look, I get texts. I wanted to share something with folks, just kind of overall thoughts at this moment here, as we're 47 days out. I get Texas calls. People see a poll where it's tightening in Florida. They freak out. They're just freaked out about this whole thing, the mess with the Postal Service, the ongoing COVID, how we're going to vote, how we're going to reach out to people in this very difficult time where we have to take care of our health. And, I want people to be grounded in this, is that, look, in a fair fight, Biden wins this. And so the question, but let me finish. Assuming that we do everything we can. Yeah. And so, are there the things that keep me up at night? At the end of the day, isn't about which it could drive you crazy. This sort of emboldened Trump voter that's getting more and more aggressive with their messaging, with their posture, with this ridiculous rally at a Target without a mask. Shooting down peace protesters in Wisconsin. So, it's getting more dangerous out there. It's becoming more volatile, more polarizing. But at the end of the day, there are more of us than them. And so the key to, even with this electoral college that leans to the right, so the key is we have to do everything we can. But of course, the thing that's probably keeping up many of you, which is keeping me up, is that the thing to control is to what extent will Trump, which we know he'll do anything, but more concerning, Barr and other people in the federal government will go to manipulate the results of this election. So those are the things that we have to be diligent. We have to be concerned about that and prepare. It may be that 50 million of us have got in the street the day after election day because it's clear it's been stolen. Let's keep it real. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, our focus, as you said, Abe, has to be on, instead of sitting around worried about it, every moment you're sitting around worried about it and stressing about it, you can get on a phone call. You can knock on a door. You can visit family. You can make sure your little cousin who just came back from, the military is registered to vote. So, Abe, those that we have to channel that energy into reaching out, because if all of us reach out to our personal networks to assure that people are registered, people fill out their census, and people have a plan to vote and have their voting by election day, we will win this. That's what it's going to take from all of us.
Yeah, hermano, tienes razón en todo lo que dijiste ahí. Absolutamente. Bro, let's unpack what you just said. All right. First of all, Bill Barr. Yes, this insidious administration is weaponizing its own government employees against the electorate. They're already setting up a failed narrative that after he loses on November 3rd, it's not going to be a legitimate election. They're already setting up that narrative. Nosotros como Latino, what we have is the ability to control our own destinies by starting with conversations with our families. First thing is to make sure everybody in the family is registered to vote. Then you want to have a plan on election day and getting them to the polls, whether that's a mail-in ballot, an absentee form, early voting. You could do that now. Just call the elections office in your county, find out what the hours are, go in, fill it out, vote, participate. People in your neighborhood, people in your church, the people you see at the bodegas, talk to them. Make sure that they realize how important this election is. We can't afford a single person sitting this out. So we can look at all the polls, we can get excited. Pero mira, te voy a decir la verdad, mano, yo no puedo hacer absolutamente nada en términos de lo que está pasando en Florida. Pero yo puedo hablar con mi gente aquí en Pensilvania. And if somebody's listening in North Carolina, they could talk to their neighbors in North Carolina, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, in Arizona. We can control our little pockets of influence. And if we take that seriously, then we're going to have a major victory on election day. I am convinced that we can do this, but it has to be an organized, concerted effort. We have to put our backs into it, and we have to take it seriously. We can't have a single person that we care about and love sit this one out, Ralph. Not a single person.
That's right. And listen to Abe Ambrose, Democratic strategist. Abe, I think one of the things I want to get your take and help our people out there, because look, the reality is, we're political animals, love this stuff. We were in it when it wasn't even cool. Now it's like life or death stuff, right?
Literally.
But there's a lot of people that don't. And, hey, I don't blame you. There's plenty of things to enjoy your life to not worry about all this stuff, right, at the end of the day. But there's people watching and listening to this right now. I know they're thinking, Abe, said, I'm not a political person. But I do have a cousin, an in-law, a girlfriend down the block. But, they would vote for Biden. They're not going to vote for Trump, but they feel hopeless. They may even feel on some level that the Obama era was a disappointment for whatever reason. They have their reasons to be cynical. Mm-hmm. They're worried about how to vote and with all the dynamics. Give people advice, Abe. Yes. People that are watching this, que tienen ese miedo to take that step, to have these conversations and have these, fruitful conversations with their neighbors and friends.
Yes. What you just described is legitimate and very real. There's a lot of hopelessness out there. So what I say to the community is, don't let your fear paralyze you. Lo que ha hecho este hombre, el presidente de los Estados Unidos, se ha abusado de la comunidad latina en una forma horrible. If we don't do something about it, the abuse will continue. We cannot take this for granted. If Trump gets another 4 years, our communities of color, especially the Latino community, will be decimated. We don't have time to rehash the past. We don't have time to complain about the past. What we have is 47 days of action. If we take that seriously, Joe Biden will win and this nightmare will be over. Don't let that fear paralyze you. Don't let that fear consume you. Cada uno de nosotros odiamos el abuso. Lo que tenemos aquí es un abusador. El abusador en la Casa Blanca. Tenemos que eliminar el abusador en la Casa Blanca. Y lo podemos hacer juntos.
And if this gives you any more motivation out there, fam, I want you to understand something. And I don't say this to be alarmist. I'm saying this because one of the things I've been doing the last few months is really thinking about this and studying and reading about how you look at the arc of history. You know, we think about, of our generation, we think about one day Hitler showed up and Germans became Nazis, you know? But there were many years, I was reading something where it took many years for those concentration camps to become places where, you know, either people were taken, but not necessarily all Jewish. Then it became about all Jewish. Then it became about, you know, just imprisoning them. Then eventually they killed them. So what I'm saying is that these are slow, seemingly slow baby steps in this direction. Then you realize how far away you are from the trail, right?
Yes.
So I want people to understand something. We haven't seen anything yet. If this man gets another 4 years, and who knows, with no accountability, not having to have any electoral, no electoral, worries, with Barr's DOJ. Look at something. What did Barr say this week? He said, I would charge people with sedition if they're part of a violent protest. So what is he setting up? What happens if there's an election that's obviously stolen from us? You go to a protest, 500 people there, somebody throws a bottle at a cop, and all of a sudden 500 people get a felony charge because you were part of a violent protest.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say this to be dramatic. I'm saying this to keep it real. And I've said it on the show, and we'll keep saying it. This man wins. At one point in the next 4 years of my life, I will be put in prison. And I think it probably, now, you know, is it to scare me? Is it to put me away forever? Is it to kill me, to hide me? Like they do in other countries, like the way we're going could happen? I'm just letting you know this is how bad it can get. So, you know, take this next 2 months and empower yourself to say, and we're going to talk about a few women that have empowered themselves to be champions of our community, to stand up and take these little steps. Abe, I want to play a clip for you about a woman from our beloved Pennsylvania, actually from the Reading area, a professor at Kutztown University. Much respect to our folks up there, Berks County. Professor Lisa Black, who at a town hall in Philadelphia with President Trump, spoke on behalf of all of us on some level, spoke her truth in a way with a strength that we have so little of in our politics, not enough, certainly not enough in our media. And I think in many ways spoke for millions of Americans as it relates to the critical importance to save, salvage, and protect the Affordable Care Act. And I'll get your reflections on the other side of the clip.
Should pre-existing conditions, which Obamacare brought to fruition, be removed?
No.
Please stop and let me finish my question, sir. Should that be removed within a 36 to 72 hour period without my medication? I will be dead.
You're trying to strike down the whole law. We have run it really well, but we also have now if you go Department of Labor, our great secretary, as you know, and you know them well, we have other alternatives to Obamacare that are 50% less expensive and that are actually better.
It's been 3.5 years.
I think that says it all, my friend.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
3.5 years.
Yeah, 3.5 years with no plan, no solution, no alternative, just hateful rhetoric. And the other mistake he made was he interrupted an African-American woman who happens to be a professor. That's a bad combination.
Who has a pre-existing condition.
With a pre-existing condition. Someone that has absolutely no interest in voting for him again, clearly, after that exchange. The man is a charlatan. El tipo es un charlatán. El rey de los charlatanes. We cannot allow him another 4 years. One of your viewers just posted that she's afraid of what's going to happen in November. I'm going to say to her, take that fear, use it to motivate you to act. Get other people to act as well. Use that fear as a strength. Use that fear as a weapon for good. It's okay to be afraid. We're all afraid. We can't tolerate another 4 more years of this. But what we can do is mobilize together because there are more good people out there than not. The 39%, Ralph, it's not going anywhere. The 39% is going to be the 39%. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
We have to just not even talk to those people right now. Let the little monsters talk to the little monsters. We don't need to go there.
That's right. Vanessa Maria, who actually is the executive producer of the radio version of the show, is the person you were speaking about. And she's saying they're setting the bail of the protesters in Lancaster at $1 million. That, of course, speaks to another questionable, I don't have the young man's name in front of me, but the young Latino man that was killed by the police in questionable circumstances. He was having a mental health breakdown. And the police have treated the protesters very badly out in Lancaster. We're hearing a lot of concerning issues, including, again, $1 million bail. We have Federico DeJesus in the queue. We'll get to Federico in a few minutes. And you're watching and listening to the Bomba Live Found in Translation simulcast. Abe, before we transition into the next segment, I wanted to give another Black female who's standing up for our community her flowers, her recognition. And it speaks to, again, what's at stake for our community in this election. If you're feeling fear, you're feeling uncomfortable getting out of your comfort zone to get involved in politics, I want you to look at this woman for a second. This depiction of her. This is Dawn Wooten. Dawn Wooten is a nurse. She's not a civil rights icon. She's not an elected official. She's a nurse. Dawn Wooten's a nurse in Georgia at the Irvin County Detention Facility that's holding that's an ICE facility for immigrants that are being held in federal custody. And this quote she said the other day, then just sit there and be part of something inhumane. So Dawn became a whistleblower and is reported in the media and legal circles that in the proper authorities that there are women being forced to get unwanted hysterectomies in the ICE facility. And Federico, that's going to be on with us in a moment, who's a great historian of Puerto Rican history, much more than I am, can tell us better that history resonates with our community. Because for decades, the same thing, forced sterilizations, happened to Puerto Rican women in the island of Puerto Rico, amongst the poor and darker, traditionally the poor, darker Puerto Rican women of that era. And so this ugly history of our country, sterilizing women, abusing women. And by the way, why are these women even in custody? If you're going to deport them, just deport them. Abe, I know you honor Dawn Wooten, but I know that just the fact that Miss Wooten, who's now been demoted and is working part-time now at that facility because of her bravery, I know it just it brings up a lot of emotions.
Yes, and there's an old saying, to sin by silence is the worst sin of all. So I commend her for her bravery, her courage.
Right there, dog.
History will treat her kindly. History will treat her kindly. And under a new administration, maybe, just maybe, she'll turn up a lot better with a better position than her current position now. But I commend her for her bravery and for stepping up stepping up when the moment called for.
And by the way, we talk about this thing, Black Latino unity, we don't work together. It's a Black female, not even from New York or Miami, just from Southern Georgia, which only until this new generation has had a Latino population, much of a Latino population. This woman stepped it up for women she probably had even a difficult time communicating with in language. This woman stepped it up because it was the right thing to do. And I say this, and it speaks to what Mr. Torres is saying in the chat, and we'll get to that in a minute. Antonio, it's a good point. And I just got to keep it real.
I keep it real, bro. Yeah.
Keep it real.
Speak
and I'm looking at my
power.
Latinos right now. This is a clarion call to say we're going to step it up right now.
Ahora.
If every Latino that's in ICE didn't go to work tomorrow, they could hold all these people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just keep it real.
Mm-hmm. Cierto.
That kid, Andres Guardado in L.A., innocent kid, working night shift at a security guard, was killed by a Latino cop. So, we have to hold ourselves accountable first. We're going to lighten up for a second. We're going to transition before we get to Federico DeJesus here on Found Translation Bomba Live simulcast. We're going to lighten up the mood. These wonderful young children, Kaideli Axel, the Puerto Rico YouTube sensations, were on the show a few weeks ago. We're going to play a couple of their hilarious clips. Federico's going to really like that last one because it's got a little political tinge to it. And then we'll bring on our very special guest to talk about Joe Biden, came out with his Puerto Rico plan and other issues related to the Puerto Rican vote and Puerto Rican community related to these elections. Thank you all so much for watching and listening to the Bomba Live simulcast. Let's check out my young boys here. We'll bring Federico into the mix.
Ahí está llegando un avión. Pues vamos. Hola, bienvenido a Puerto Rico. Welcome to Puerto Rico.
¡Todo Puerto Rico! A comer pasteles, a comer lechón, arroz con cangura y a beber ron. Que venga morcilla, venga de todo. Y que se chave con...
Turista, bienvenido a Puerto Rico. Tenemos las mejores playas, tenemos buena música y también tenemos buena comida. Y también tenemos coronavirus. Próximo. Superman. ¿Qué tú haces aquí? Para solicitar los chavos del clon. ¿Tú rendiste planilla el año pasado? ¿Te leíste 100 años de soledad? ¿Qué tiene que ver eso? Ah, se me cayó el sistema. Hello. Perdón, lugar de nacimiento. Cristón. ¿Dónde queda eso? Por Ponce. Bueno, te va a llegar el depósito entre mañana y junio 2022.
I tell you, those kids, they get me every time. Un saludo, Kaideli Axel, su papá, Jesus, in San Juan, does a great job with those kids. Thank you so much. We're so happy to bring on our very special guest, really one of the true experts on Puerto Rico policy and issues impacting the Puerto Rican community here on the island in the diaspora. Federico DeJesus, welcome finally to Bomba Live. Found a translation, brother.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful. Abe, I know you want to formally introduce him, and then we'll get into this Puerto Rico plan that Vice President Biden released, which we're really excited to discuss.
Yes, Federico is an expert in Puerto Rican politics and also the diaspora community in the United States of America. And he's here to talk about what this election means and how Latinos, Puerto Ricans specifically, can mobilize and organize and feel part of this election. Is really key, really crucial, very important. So, Federico, welcome to the program.
Gracias, Rafael, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So so much to discuss with Federico, but the first thing is, we want to thank you, Federico, first of all, because you and your group of allied coalition partners have been calling on, first of all the candidates during the primary season. We had Frederick Velez on during his sojourn to the Iowa caucuses on this issue earlier in the year. And then And then, subsequently, once Biden formed, it was clear Biden was going to receive the nomination. You and other activists have been calling on, let's see a real comprehensive plan about what you would do if you were president to impact the Puerto Rican community on the island and in the mainland. We've been a small part of that. We've basically been banging that drum, Abe, how many months, basically saying the same thing. We were waiting for it. And lo and behold, as the polls are tightening and the election is unfolding here in the final months, we have what I would say is a fairly thorough Puerto Rico plan to chew on. So, Federico, share with us just some broad strokes around your initial thoughts about this plan that the Biden-Harris campaign have released related to Puerto Rico.
And shout out to Frederick and all the folks at Power for Puerto Rico and the allies. Frederick also went to New Hampshire with us and Florida. So this has been a year and a half campaign with all the candidates, like you said. And thankfully, the laws of political gravity, at least some of them still exist. And the vice president was presenting his plan in front of the heart of the Puerto Rican diaspora in Kissimmee. It was long overdue. And as you said, it was very comprehensive. And, we can pick apart the details of the policy, but it was just good to show a solid, firm, and specific commitment towards a key part of the electorate in Florida that will probably swing the state, and hopefully it'll swing it blue.
So, Federico, I want to get to the status piece next, because that's usually what, unfortunately, people focus on as sort of the only issue in mainland Democratic Republican politics, which is not the case. But that obviously that is something we have to talk about. But why don't you share with people how the issues related to the debt and there wasn't much mention of the Promesa Board, but issues related to sort of the fiscal crisis and the relief, the ongoing relief needs of the island were addressed from your analysis.
Sure. So let's start with the disaster and the hurricane. Biden made I think, solid commitment. Obviously, he had said that he would fully fund the recovery and that he wouldn't mistreat or insult Puerto Ricans as Donald Trump has done. That was good. But in terms of the specifics, he mentioned two specific things. He said, aside again from investing in infrastructure and green energy and rebuilding the energy of Puerto Rico that was all battered before and after the hurricane, there's still outages in the island. But related to going forward, he said that he would basically remove unnecessary barriers that the Trump administration has placed on Puerto Rico specifically to prevent the aid from going to the island. And at the same time, recognizing that, unfortunately, under this administration in Puerto Rico, there's been a lot of corruption, not necessarily the hurricane money, but there were arrests of other officials. So he said that he would bring a level of transparency, like when the Recovery Act, when he was in the White House and Obama was president, you could see on a map and you would hover over your city or your county and you could see how much ARA money, the Recovery Act money, was being spent in what project. And I think that Puerto Ricans deserve that money, but they also deserve that level of transparency. So aside from, all the empty gestures that politicians usually make, that level of specificity really showed that he studied this, that his team worked. And I think that moving forward, that's the type of investment in terms of the hurricane and recovery that Puerto Rico needs. Now, you mentioned the debt, which is obviously the other major problem, a $70 billion debt that's obviously unpayable, especially after 2 Category 5 storms, a series of devastating earthquakes, and now a pandemic. Puerto Rico's debt needs to be substantially reduced. He did mention the audit of the debt, which is something that people of all parties in Puerto Rico and in the diaspora have clamored for, because already the junta, the Fiscal Control Board, has declared that $6 billion out of that $70 billion was contracted illegally. So how much more was illegal, right? So we need a very independent and comprehensive audit of that debt. Obviously, debt forgiveness as much as possible. And Vice President Biden, in a demonstration of respect to the Puerto Rican community, said the junta needs to respect the elected leaders of Puerto Rico. Now, obviously, that's easier said than done. We would hope that the Promesa law would be abolished, but short of that, I think that he was very specific in the level of detail, for example, in reducing the level of austerity that the junta has imposed on Puerto Rico, everything from closures to reducing pensions and other cuts, for example, to the State Election Commission in Puerto Rico that recently had a debate in their primaries because the ballots weren't printed on time. That's obviously incompetence, but it's also a result of draconian tens of millions of dollars cut by this unelected junta. So, we can quibble with the details, but in terms of the economics, Biden promised what no presidential candidate has promised towards Puerto Rico, which is equal funding for healthcare programs, equal funding for SNAP. Puerto Rico doesn't even participate in that nutritional assistance program, and also under SSI, the supplemental security income that doesn't apply in Puerto Rico, but that the courts recently ruled that should. So the Biden administration would uphold that and do much more. So again, happy to go into the details with you if you want.
Yeah, no, and one of the things that I was particularly happy to see, and look, like I said, we've all on some level been this drumbeat and critical of him as a candidate in the primaries and wanting to see more specifics around what he would do for the Puerto Rican community. So we're happy to see it. I think it's a little late, frankly. It's a little wish he had gotten it earlier, but nevertheless, it's comprehensive. But on the positive side, I specifically appreciate the fact that there's a lot of language there related to K through 12 and higher ed funding, and really trying to support the University of Puerto Rico in the system on the island, which, until this recent austerity period is one of the shining beacons of higher education in the Caribbean and Latin America. But the workforce development stuff, thinking about our great friend from Brands of Puerto Rico, Alan Taveras, there's a lot of emphasis around supporting Puerto Rican small businesses on the island. So what other highlights, before I ask you this question around how it tried to address the status question, what are the highlights that you want to share with our Bomba Live community, Federico?
Sure. So the plan also includes heavy investment in workforce development. Obviously, the labor force participation rate in Puerto Rico is around 40% compared to the U.S., which is about 63%. So that's something that we desperately need. You mentioned the University of Puerto Rico. In terms of K through 12, he mentioned tripling Title I funding for Puerto Rico, which is key. And I think that the tone in general was on mark. I agree with you that it should have come earlier. But listen, your friends are the ones who tell you what you want, what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. So this was a bit of tough. And we finally got what we wanted. And obviously it's not perfect, but it's something that we can show the community when we go in and knock on doors, either virtually or physically. Again, big shout out to the folks at Power for Puerto Rico. Yesterday, they made 140,000 calls to Florida and Pennsylvania for the country to get people to the polls. So really proud of that. And we just got to keep the drumbeat going.
Yeah, no, my brother Michael Collazo was one of them yesterday. He enjoyed it and was calling into Pennsylvania. And my team at Unidos will be starting in the next few weeks, focused on the Latino Puerto Rican vote in Pennsylvania. But Federico, before he gets in his questions related to sort of what you see as kind of the political impact of this plan, the last thing I want to share with you is, can you share with people how the plan addresses the status question? This is in the backdrop, and I think it'd be helpful too if it also is in the backdrop of this sort of quiet jockeying of Puerto Rican members of Congress as it relates to some folks positioning themselves to basically support the ballot initiative. That's the plebiscite that's on the ballot in Puerto Rico in November. Others, of course, most notably Congresswomen Velasquez and Ocasio-Cortez putting a bill forward that has a different model of determining the next step in the status question. So can you share with us kind of how Biden's plan sort of plays off the current debate going on in Washington with our own Puerto Rican members of Congress?
Sure. And, the debate, members of Congress on the pro-statehood side with Darren Soto, Jose Serrano, and others on the pro-statehood side have bills as well. And so I think that what the vice president tried to do was, look, let's have a set of principles that isn't platitudes like we usually hear from presidential candidates. Oh, you guys decide and we'll take care of it. One is a solid commitment.
And that's been a bipartisan. That's been a bipartisan rhetorical thing. Let's keep it real. But anyway, yes.
Sure. Not everybody is like Trump that says that he doesn't want us and he would trade us for Greenland, obviously.
In a second round pick. Yes.
That's right. Allen Iverson, if he were still in the NBA, could talk about the draft. But in all seriousness, I think that Biden really struck a good balance in the policy. And I mentioned the policy because bear with me for a second. He basically committed to something we've been pushing for. We need a fair, inclusive, and binding process of self-determination. And what does that mean? Fair, obviously, nobody can quibble with that. Inclusive doesn't mean, Hispanics and African Americans and diversity like that. It means diversity of options, because statehood is a very legitimate option, but there's people who want independence. There's people who want more autonomy. And there's people who want to be a state. So why don't we all include the options that people know and have a binding process so that Puerto Ricans don't keep voting unnecessarily, I think, in non-binding beauty contest votes, but actually make an informed decision. And they do vote, the Congress actually implements the result, which is what's been lacking, right? The sovereignty of Puerto Rico is in the U.S. Congress. And so if they don't act, nothing is going to change on the island. Now, that's the policy, and I think it's the correct policy. But when Biden announced it in Kissimmee, he was introduced by Luis Fonsi, and he pulled out his phone saying that, I know that you want to get into that in a second, so I'll pause that. But basically, he personally believes that statehood is the most efficient way to reach equality at the federal level. I think that nobody could argue that that's a sufficient way. The issue is, what do the people of Puerto Rico want, and how do you get there in a way that's legitimate? Because other referenda held in the island were controversial. Some people say that they weren't, but the fact is that, when 2/3 of the island boycotted the last vote, I think that says something, right? So if people don't feel they were the process and weren't included, the outcome isn't going to be seen as legitimate. So I think that the Biden policy is on the right track. By putting his thumb on the scale, I think that Biden's into something that he probably shouldn't have. It's a decision that should be made by Puerto Ricans, and the government of the United States should abide by the result. So that's kind of my 10-foot level analysis, and happy to answer your questions, because I know this is a controversial
absolutely. Abe, jump in here with your political lens. But I will say this, the last thing on the policy I want to share is that, I read it a few times, and I didn't see the word Jones in it. But that's another conversation, Federico, that, the fact it wasn't even acknowledged with the Jones Act. And, that's something that is a big part of the mechanisms of the maintaining the colonial status of the island. So that's something we're going to have to continue to push. There's no question about that. Hey, jump in here, brother. Yes, please.
The Jones Act of 1970.
Exactly. Go ahead.
No, jump in, Federico.
It's a $1.5 billion yearly tax on consumers in Puerto Rico that are forced to use U.S. flagged, owned, and manned vessels that are the most expensive in the world. And guess what? There aren't any liquefied natural gas carrying U.S. vessels. So Puerto Rico actually gets its natural gas from Russia and Trinidad instead of from Louisiana, Texas, or other U.S. states. So it makes no economic sense for either side. But, that's what it is, right? We don't get everything that we want, but we'll keep advocating for a Jones Act relief for the island. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Abe, but I just wanted to...
No, it's quite all right. No. And if you don't know anything about the Jones Act of 1917, look it up. It's great discussion. It's a wonderful place to start the discussion in terms of fairness and equality for Puerto Rico. Federico, last week, every major publication in this country was talking about the Latino discrepancy with the Biden campaign. And then on Tuesday, we see some polling data that shows that he's actually doing okay with the Latino community. So, as an expert, seeing that Florida is going to be a bellwether for Joe Biden, what is really happening in Florida?
Well, look, I know you have my friend and former colleague, Carlos Odio, who has all of the numbers and the stats and has really delved into being accurate in this. And I really commend Decky's research and my friend Stephanie Valencia. What's really going on is that Biden is ahead with the Latino vote, both in Florida and nationally. But let's take Arizona, for example. Everybody talks about Florida, but let's take a look at Arizona. I was looking at some numbers that had Biden, I think, with 63% and Trump with 33%. Now, that 33% number is too high. And so part of the thing isn't that just necessarily that Biden is behind somewhat, or even with Hillary Clinton, but that the pro-Trump Latino numbers are higher than they should be. Let's remember that before the station of families, before a lot of what's been going on, Trump got more Latino votes, according to the exit polls, than Mitt Romney did, Mr. Deportation. So what does that tell us? I think that we should be frank with our voters. There's a lot of conservative Latinos. There are a lot of Latinos who are racist, that are elitist, that are anti-immigrant. And there's an audience for a caudillo, even though they say they're for democracy in Cuba, Venezuela, and Central America, and other places. The fact is, deep down, and Carlos has mentioned this on Twitter, and I'm sure that he has more evidence and data, but people like a caudillo. So all of that, plus the fact that unfortunately Democrats have been too late to the game, with honorable exceptions like the former mayor of Tallahassee, Gill, who's been ringing the alarm bell about all this information about Democrats being communist and bringing in a socialist debacle, all of this law and order nonsense that we're hearing. Well, unfortunately, that's had an impact on Latinos, and that disinformation hasn't been countered early enough. But I think that Biden understood this. Obviously, it was a wake-up call when all these polls started. There was another poll from Monmouth that had Trump ahead of Biden in Florida among Latinos that have Biden ahead. And I think that it's all about the margins and turnout, right? Unlike Hillary, I think that Biden does have more support among white males in certain areas, but that shouldn't be a strategy that ignores the Puerto Ricans, the Cubans, and other Central Americans. So I think that Biden has work to do. I'm glad that Ricky Martin and Luis Fonsi and Bad Bunny and Alejandro Fernandez and Eva Longoria are all on board. I'm seeing more investment, not just from the campaign, but from Chuck Rocha's Nuestro Futuro PAC, which put out an ad. So hopefully this ramp will have an effect, and we'll get out our folks, because, this is the election. I mean, we say this every 4 years, but there has been no president that has attacked Latinos, Boricuas, and all of Hispanics as much as Donald Trump. And we need to hammer out that message both on the economics, not just on immigration in Puerto Rico, on COVID and healthcare. This administration has a lawsuit that would take away the Obamacare, which gave 20 million more Americans healthcare, including Latinos. So I think that this is too much of a high for us to sit out. And I'm glad that programs like yours are out there educating our folks.
In a nutshell, and after I read the 6-page document from the Biden-Harris campaign, I came away with one word: respect. He actually respects the Puerto Rican community. He actually respects the Latino community. He sees our value. He sees that we're part of the social fabric, and he understands that we're not going anywhere. To your point on the Monmouth University poll, it's a small sample. One of the criticisms that I saw was that it only had about 440 participants in it. So we have to take those polls with a grain of salt. That could have been an outlier. And to your other point, Federico, which is really important, for some reason, some of our Latino men, and I'm talking to the Latino men, like a strongman argument. They think that a tough guy embodies strength. No, a tough guy lacks self-esteem. A tough guy lacks respect. A tough guy gets nothing done, and most tough guys are nothing more than narcissists who have their own set of fears that they need to manifest upon other people. So just remember that. Don't fall for that strong man argument. It's nonsense and it's dangerous. So we can't buy into that argument. Simply can't buy into that argument. So Federico, do you think that Florida is going to be the most important state for Joe Biden, given the fact that we have so many Latinos there? You've got the Cuban Americans, you've got the Latinx community, you've got the Puerto Rican community in the area that you're talking about in Kissimmee and Orlando. How important moving forward is Florida going to be in terms of resources for this campaign?
I think Florida is key, but as we've seen in other polls, Biden is competing hard in Arizona, in North Carolina, even in Georgia. Some people even see Texas as competitive. I think that we've been used to that tease for the last couple of cycles, but I hope that we can get there. But so the more states that the Biden campaign is competitive in, I think that the higher the impact of the Latino community. If we have in North Carolina, for example, 200,000 Puerto Ricans, in Pennsylvania, about 450,000 Puerto Ricans. Obviously, there are all sorts of other Latinos there. And in Ohio, there's a big Puerto Rican community and outside of Cleveland. So I think that we can have an impact. Obviously, there's 1.2 million Puerto Ricans in Florida. Obviously, the Cuban population in Florida is huge. In terms of voters, they're actually more than Puerto Ricans. And so I think that we should play everywhere. And I'm glad that the Biden campaign is even, one of their first Latino ads was a Puerto Rican woman in Wisconsin whose father died from COVID, sadly. So that's smart, right? We shouldn't think about Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona. There's all sorts of swing states where the Latino community would play a role. And remember that Donald Trump won the electoral vote with a mix of 17,000 votes from Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So that was really what decided the election, and I think Latinos will be pivotal to that. And so we're really excited for this election, and we hope that everybody gets geared up. It's a month and a half away.
Yeah, now I actually want to ask, and then there's some folks that have a different point of view, which I do want to address in the chat, because I don't want them thinking I'm ignoring them. We'll get to you, my friends. But Abe, I do want to ask you, Abe, you're going to be one of the main point people for our outreach with the Puerto Rican Latino community in Pennsylvania. And obviously, the largest voting bloc amongst the Latino communities, Puerto Ricans. Why don't you share with our audience in the diaspora and throughout the diaspora and the country just a little snippet about, what you're seeing on the ground and how important the Latino vote will be here in Pennsylvania?
Oh, I see a lot of movement so far in terms of discussions, in terms of texts, in terms of virtual events. We're severely limited in what we can do in terms of door knocking, in terms of rallies because of COVID. And that's very frustrating because we as Latinos, we like to be in each other's porches. We like to be at events. We like to be at church functions. We like to be at picnics. We like to be at the bodegas outside, So this has been a real challenge. But everybody has a smartphone. Everybody uses that smartphone. Everybody likes to be in terms of they like to communicate via text. They like to communicate via Zoom. They use these social platforms like Facebook and Twitter, Instagram. We're communicating. We are communicating, and with a special emphasis on making sure that family members, neighbors, people you go to church with, they're all using these social platforms to communicate and talk about a plan to vote. And if you're not registered, you've got until October the 19th to register to vote. That is the key message. The activity continues. And now what we need are more people, more boots on the ground in terms of resources, making sure that everybody understands those key messages.
That's right. And, Biden did have an interesting moment after Luis Fonsi introduced him, sort of playing Despacito on the stage. He got a hit out of it. It was a little awkward, but nevertheless, Federico, I did want to ask you really quickly, while we can sit here and talk to you about Puerto Rican politics all day, really quickly, brother, because you're one of the people I respect the most as it relates to island politics. They're actually doing El Gran Debate, the first debate as we speak. Just any thoughts about the gubernatorial race on the island? We have not only the traditional parties, we've got some new parties to have some a decent amount of support on the island. So it's going to be quite unpredictable. Just any thoughts about the governor's race on the island wanted to share with our folks?
Sure. I think that for the first time in a long time, I think since 2000, we'll see the Puerto Rican Independence Party get a lot more votes than we're used to seeing. And the last time they got 5% was in 2000 after Vieques. So, they've been getting 2-point-something% throughout the last cycle.
That helps, right? That amounts a good candidate, generally considered a legit candidate,
Definitely. And he's a solid senator. He's worked across the aisle to ban conversion therapy and on issues for the blind and the hard of hearing. We also have the Nuevo Movimiento Victoria Ciudad, who in some polls is even second after the PDP. Usually, obviously, it's the PDP and the PNP, the statehood and Commonwealth parties, duking it out. But I think people are tired of the same alternatives. I think that the candidates themselves are not necessarily traditionally aligned. For example, the pro-Commonwealth Party, which is usually the center-left party, has a candidate that's not a very well-known person. He's a small-town mayor, and he's more concerned on social issues. Usually those type of voters tend to flock towards the PNP. So there might be some realignments here and surprises that not a lot of people expect. There is a debate going on right now in WAPA, so if you have WAPA America, tune in and we'll see what happens. And we also have a debate. You also have a status statehood yes or no in November, so it's going to be a very interesting general election in the island.
That's right. Federico, any final thoughts? We have Puerto Ricans and people watching from all over the country and throughout the diaspora. Un saludo a toda nuestra familia que está mirando de Puerto Rico en vivo. Just any final thoughts you have for our community at this moment in our history, Federico?
Look, there's never been a moment where the Puerto Rican community has been more organized, at least in the 20-plus years that I've been in the state. It's not just Hurricane Maria. It's not just the economy. I think that we're waking up. And one of the first tools that we have, we're U.S. citizens by birth. We need to register. We need to go out to vote. We need to get energized because the COVID situation, the healthcare situation, the situation in the island, all of that depends on who we elect, not just at the federal level, but at the state and local level as well. Those are the people that wind up in Congress later, and those are the people closer to your community. So get engaged, get motivated, and look, the candidates, you're not falling in love to get married. You're hiring a manager to help the country out. Joe Biden is the candidate need, and I think that we should all vote. And I hope that everybody who listens just goes out and participates and makes democracy great again. I think that should be the key: make democracy great again, just or not like Trump has.
Absolutely, Federico. Thank you so much. First of all, for what you do for the Puerto Rican community. There aren't enough people that have your expertise to be able to educate our community, particularly Puerto Ricans in the diaspora. They're not as in tune with island issues in language and culturally to teach us about how these issues impact our community. So thank you so much for your leadership and your friendship. We're going to be working together. We're going to let you go because I do want me and Abe, before we get into our next segment, to address our friends and have a little discussion with our friends here. So Federico, thank you so much. Y gracias, hermano. And next time you come on, we're going to talk salsa, because I'm a big salsero también. So I want to have the Papo Luca, Eddie Palmieri debate, but we'll save that for another time.
We'll save that for another night. Take care.
Hablamos, Federico. So, one of the reasons, Abe, it's so wonderful to have this show, it's such a blessing, is that I love introducing people like Federico to our community. Yeah. I don't think enough of us realize we have Puerto Ricans that capacidad and all these different genres. Obviously, we're focused on the politics, but in the sciences and these intellectual people that care about our community and are down people. So we don't got to all agree about everything. And I want to get to our friends in the chat in a second, but it is about having a platform, because look, we're not going to get this on basic cable, or, if you wait for Channel 6 to discuss our issues with this kind of depth, you're going to be waiting a long time. So I'm really, and obviously, Abe, you're a big part of that conversation. I do want to address, we have a couple of friends in the chat. Angel, I want to get the name, Angel and Annalisa that basically think we're full of it. And so I want to address Angel's issue first. So true. So Angel's going into, and me and Angel, for full disclosure, I've been a little hard on him too, back and forth on Facebook. So I'll be fair to Angel. I've been tough on him as much as he's tough on me. So we're good. It's all fam, Angel. But he's talking about, well, you guys are full of it because the crime happens in cities and Democrats run the cities. So we're talking the presidential election, and I don't want anyone to walk away here thinking that I think Biden's a god. I don't believe that. I think there's no saviors here. We have to work together. He's a vessel. He's someone we can work with. I just sat here and critiqued, made some, I think we did some fair analysis of the good and the bad of this proposal. I was pretty clear that it came too late. We should have had it earlier, and the outreach should have happened early. But the reality is, Joe Biden's not going to stand silent if women are getting raped and abused in these ICE facilities. We will have, Kamala Harris was at the Puerto Rico in North Philly today. We may not end up agreeing with her on everything, but these are people that will have a door to have a discussion with about the issues impacting our community. So in terms of cities, Angels, we can have that debate. You want to talk about working to change elected officials? The Working Family Party, brother, just elected a city council person. So if you want to change the dynamics of the Democratic Party in Philadelphia or wherever you live, I think you live in Philly, you should get involved and do that.
Correct.
As a Republican, whatever, you should do that. So, and the bottom line with the big city issue that Trump is using to distract people from the fact that probably over 100,000 people died unnecessarily because of incompetence management of COVID, is that crime goes up, generally speaking, when the economy goes down.
Right.
So the economy went down because of his mismanagement, and crime is going up.
Right.
And by the way, not in every city evenly. So there's management happening to different levels in different cities. Abe, why don't you talk to Annalisa's question? Again, I ain't doing this to be mad at y'all, but y'all coming at me, so we're gonna have a discussion. So that's the answer. That's my answer to that, bro. You want to organize Republicans to run for city council, and you should do that. You should absolutely do that. That's what people do. It's called organizing. So to Anna's point, Anna's saying basically that she believes what Trump is saying and said on the clip, that he has a better healthcare plan. Anna, there is no plan. You can Google it. Mama, and I'm not trying to be mean to you. There's no plan. You have to have plans, very sophisticated plans about what a healthcare plan would look like. And in fact, he is actually taking a lawsuit to the Supreme Court to get rid of Obamacare completely with no replacement. So if that bill, which he put in to get rid of Obamacare a few years ago, had passed, if McCain, Descanse en paz, had voted to get rid of Obamacare, at that moment, because there was no replacement bill in that bill, no replacement, all these people would have kicked up the rolls, and all those millions of people lost their health care. People would have died. So if the Supreme Court decision goes the other way, that's what's going to happen. So there's no plan. I mean, you can Google it, you can look for it, go on the White House website, go on the it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. We're not lying to you, Ma. We're not lying to you. Now, we can disagree on other things. Abe, right? It's not about being against Republicans. Look, I'm going to be with the Lincoln Project people in 2 weeks. So address this situation, because I don't want these people thinking we're against having a discussion. But we got to deal with facts.
A healthy dialogue is important. That's how we learn to understand each other. That's how we can get along, as long as we do it in a civil fashion. We're not calling each other out, calling each other names. And speaking of which, this is one of the reasons why Trump is just a disaster, because he slides into that despicable mode of name calling, of lying. He is a pathological liar that is not disputable. It's not disputable. On the argument of inner cities, we have a lot of issues with poverty and a lack of opportunity. That's not just in brown and black communities, but poor white communities as well. Let's be honest about that, okay? What Trump is doing is he's blowing a dog whistle, and that dog whistle is aimed at blue states with cities the size of Philadelphia,
with black
the size
people.
of Harrisburg,
with
the
a lot
size
of black
of
people in
Lancaster.
them.
That's right, with a lot of black people, because what he does is he divides. He intentionally plays on people's fears,
That's right,
their hatred, and their intolerance. That is despicable. Forget politics for a minute. In my opinion, he fails abominably as a human being. ¿Qué clase de persona existe para dividirnos? ¿Qué clase de persona?
and that
Una persona diabólica.
That's right. And look, there's some people, and there's some people now that'll say, I don't really care if he's a good person, because I think he's good for the economy. For whatever reason, you think he's good at something.
It's not.
But this is the problem. And I want people to understand, this is the problem with that thinking, is that when it comes, because this is about public service, this is about running a casino, which, by the way, he was horrible at too.
Yeah.
They all failed. I mean, it's the easiest business in the world to have. You roll it out and people pay you. So he's a horrible manager with everything. And then but when it comes down, when people, honestly, when he doesn't care about other people, just cares about himself, you may think he's a genius, fine. But when it comes down to it, like COVID, when it was about, okay, I got to forget about my politics and be straight with people and deal with this, he decided, no, what's easier for me is just to kind of play people along and not tell people really the truth. So that's what it comes down to. It's public service. And again, hey, we were Republicans. My dad, it's all, I'm going to be with Republicans too. It's all good. We can have those discussions and we can have legitimate, disagreements. Look, I don't think the deficit should be this much. So, there's a lot of areas of agreement, but we got to be real about it, fam. And let's keep talking about it. And I encourage our folks that disagree with us, organize people around your vision, and we can continue these conversations. Abe, I want to play for us a great interview I did earlier with a fantastic pollster and political operative, Carlos Odio. Any final thoughts before we get to this interview to wrap up the show with Carlos?
Yes, use that fear and that anger to mobilize. Use it as a strength. You can do it.
Abe, you're a good man, brother. Let's listen to Carlos. I will come back at the end of the interview because I want to do a special dedication to who this episode is. We lost a member of the Bomba Life family, so I want to give them some love at the end of this episode and play a song in their honor at the end of the show. So I'll be back in about 15 minutes. Enjoy this great conversation with Carlos Odio around the Latino vote around the country and in Florida, Pennsylvania, all these fun things. Hey, great talking to you, brother.
Likewise.
What is the We Are Penn State? Is that what y'all talk? Nittany Lions.
That's right. The Nittany Lions.
Keep roaring, Lions.
Yeah, that's right. Big Ten. Here we come.
God bless you, brother. Have a good one.
Amen.
Welcome back to Found Translation, a show that stacks truth about politics And as I often say on the show, you need to bring a notebook, apuntate, because we are giving you the kind of information that is very hard to find on mainstream media, and bring you the people that are really making it happen. And this fella is not as despite the main, which is world class right now, brother. You may not know the face, but he's doing some incredible work behind the scenes as the co-founder and senior vice president of Equis Lab, a top-notch Latino data research and communications firm, and one of my Cubanito homies, Carlos Odio. Carlos, welcome to Founder Translation.
Ray, it is good to be on. Finally, it took me this long to get an invite. You know, what does a friend have to do?
Well, you know, I have to give credit to a great friend of mine who I want to connect you with at some point. One of my great LA Cuban friends, Nisam Leon, the Cuban Lion on social media. He's a great sports commentator. And he did one of those. You remember that scene in Do the Right Thing when Spike Lee tells the Italian guy, hey, how come there's no brothers on the wall? Yep. He kind of did a nice little tweet to me the other day. Say, hey, all this Cuban Puerto Rican unity stuff, bro, and I don't see any of my people on the show. So anyway, but overdue for sure. Great friend and part of the family here on Found Translation. So Carlos, before we get into the political stuff, you have your wealth of knowledge. But again, got to give respect to the main. And I'm thinking, where did this style get inspired? Hold on. I have a theory. I believe you are channeling the great 80s superstar, the Puma himself.
Oh, wow.
Jose Luis Rodriguez.
Oh, man. That's
good. I
good.
see your play. Not only is it dashing, but it's a subtle little subliminal message to the Venezolanos. I see your dash, your play. Brother, you got game, bro. There's no question.
Strategy behind the style. Can I tell you the real strategy behind the style? This is pure up pandemic hair. It's like it's survival around here. Survival.
No question about it. Fun fact: when I worked at Democracia, actually in those years when me and your wife were coworkers, I was actually by coincidence, didn't know. I actually attended the Puma's citizenship ceremony at the Miami Beach Convention Center. We're doing voter registration with our crew at Democracia, and the Puma walked out. He's one of the 2,000 people. So I was part of his history in this welcome to America moment. But Carlos, in all seriousness, you've been very popular in the progressive circles because people have seen polling and people are getting really nervous and trying to get an understanding of what's going on with the Latino community, specifically in Florida. But I first want to get, you work with Equis Lab. You're doing some incredible research on trends and the attitudes of Latinos with these elections around the country. So just give us a big picture, a thumbnail sketch of kind of where you see the Latino electorate falling into play here as we're 47 days out from Election Day.
Yeah, and Ray, you'll appreciate, we've been doing this research now for a year. The interview requests have only hit in the last 10 days because you had kind of the Florida freak out happen.
Yes.
But the numbers are not that different. That's what's kind of interesting here. We're not releasing numbers that are, they haven't shifted as much as you might expect. Listen, where we are today, it is a very strange year, as you can imagine. And I think a lot of the attention has been paid on Florida. As you know very well, the Latino vote is different by state. We have a different environment this year because normally you'd have a big outreach blitz coming out of the primary, and instead we had a pandemic. And so the shape of outreach has looked very different. You don't have the physical presence that generally makes such a big impact. But the big picture is, for a long time, we saw no movement for Donald Trump. Donald Trump was not increasing on the Latino vote. He had a slight shift after 2016 where he kind of normalized a little bit, especially in Florida. But 2019 onwards, we haven't seen Donald Trump really uptick until recently. In the last month, in this last wave of polling, you see some consolidation of voters who are probably more Republican leaning and were waiting for an excuse to come back to him and have finally found one. Biden, meanwhile, we talk about Biden underperformance. A big part of what we saw coming out of the primary is a lot of Latino voters just didn't know very much about Joe Biden. It's not that they had hostility toward him. It's that they didn't know very much about him. They knew he was vice president and couldn't tell you anything beyond that. And so when we first polled coming out of the primary, what we found is a lot of people just saying, I'm going to wait and see here. I need to hear more. They weren't shifting to Trump. It was, let's see what this guy's about. As he has communicated, as allies have communicated on his behalf, you see him now bouncing back up to what a generic Democrat was getting in our earlier polling. And now in a state like Arizona, he's probably more or less where he needs to be. If the election were today, Joe Biden wins. I think we know that.
Yes.
The question is if dynamics change in any way. And I know, I follow all the forecasters just like you do, and they say it's not going to tighten, and the fundamentals are what they are, and it's not going to shift, and the polling is so. But listen, I lived through 3 cycles of Florida where we went into election day thinking we were going to win. And what always happens is a regression to the mean, right? Especially the white vote, white support levels might pull very high, but once it comes down to actual voting, you get a narrower margin there. And so what we are saying is, sure, if we vote today, given where Biden is at with older white voters in particular, some non-college white voters that he's made gains with, he'll probably be okay. But what happens if those numbers start to drop in any way? And you're going to have to make up the difference. And where is that difference going to have to come from? It's going to have to come from the Latino vote. And do we have the numbers today to make up the difference? And the reality is we're in a good place, but we're not in the kind of place that we need to be in to make up for that kind of deficit should that moment come.
Well, anyone that thinks that things can't change just have to remember the name Jim Comey and how he changed the dynamics multiple times in the last 90 days of the election. And the other dynamic here is that, and I keep telling this to people, and this is what keeps me up at night, is that we have no idea, particularly because of Attorney General William Barr, what they'll try to pull. The ultimate nightmare scenario of federal agents going into a county election board office and taking ballots. That's like in the realm of possibility. So all these things are major factors. And the debates, look, the debates were wild cards in 2016, and you just never know how they impact people. And we're talking to Carlos Odio from Equis Lab here about the Latino vote. Carlos, of course, you're the go-to for Florida. Can you explain to people, because I really appreciate the way you explain sort of the buckets of Latino voters. There's people that have very little understanding and just think it's Florida from the 80s. They see a couple stories about Puerto Ricans in Central Florida. They just think, oh, it's Puerto Ricans now.
Yeah.
But and it's a lot more nuanced.
So the flavor of the week too.
Yeah. And then there's been you would think, Caracas has been relocated to Tampa or something. But so explain to people kind of how the electorate breaks down in reality and some of the dynamics you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. So more or less what you have is around 30%, probably shy of 30% in most cases, of the Hispanic electorate, Hispanic registered voters are Cuban. It is different kinds of Cuban as well, right? You have older generations. You have those who came in the pre-80 waves, 50s, 60s, 70s. You had those who came Mariel onward in the 80s. And then you had a generation that came post-90s. And then you have the U.S. born, right? And actually today there are more U.S. born Cuban Americans in the electorate than there are históricos, which we call like the old guard. So that's one piece of it. Then you have more or less equivalent in terms of eligibility, slightly less on registration, and then lagging a little bit, I hate to say it, on actual voting is the Puerto Rican bloc, which is also more complex than people give it to. Somehow people think that, to your point about Caracas, they're like all of San Juan, and maybe like 3/4 of Ponce relocated to Orlando after the hurricane. You have, as you know, a population that's been growing since the 90s and the aughts. You have New Yorkers who moved down. You have big waves. The number of post-Maria is actually probably smaller than people expect, but you still have a large and growing, mostly concentrated in Orlando. And then the other 40% is a whole constellation, federation of other national origin groups, right? Another, like 18 other groups, the biggest being Mexican-American, Dominican, Colombian, Peruvian, Venezuelan, Nicaraguan, and so on and so forth. And a lot of that's in Miami, but it's also scattered throughout the state. That group gets a lot less attention. You would think it's all Cuban and Puerto Rican.
That's right.
The reality is the vote that probably isn't going to end up making the difference because the margins are kind of fluid, because they haven't been, campaigns haven't been competing as much for their vote, is these little groups scattered throughout the state that when you add it up, makes a big difference in a state like Florida, where Rick Scott won by 10,000 votes in 2018.
That's right, because, and I tell people all the time, I tell this story all the time on the show, is that in 2016, I have a cousin that grew up on the island, and, he didn't moved to Tampa because of he just for economic opportunities, not Hurricane Maria. He's a pretty middle class guy. His dad had a successful lumber business on the island, and I remember him putting a big thing on Facebook that I'm going for the Latino ticket. It's 2016, Hillary and Rubio. So I call him and I said, "Primo, I love you, bro, but I mean, I need to understand what's this concept." But it made a lot of sense. He said, "Look, I'm statehood on Puerto Rico. That's the party that's aligned with Rubio when he ran for his primary. Rubio spent a lot of time on the island, speaks Spanish, Cuban, culturally very similar. I saw him in an event. He was cool, was friendly with everybody, no problem. I come here, Pulse nightclub. I see him on Spanish TV.
Yeah.
I don't even know who the white guy is running against. I can't even think of his name. Murphy was an Irish name, the guy from Palm Beach. Murphy. So what do you want me to do?" And I said, "You know what? That makes a lot of sense." And so then the other dynamic, and I don't know if you've seen this in the polling, it's my theory, is that the more Puerto Ricans that are coming from the island under these circumstances, you could argue the Puerto Rican electorate gets more conservative, because the dynamic between the New Yorkers, which tend to be very democratic and kind of traditional New Yorkers, and Northeasterners like my cousins that grew up in Philadelphia and I live in Volusia County, the dynamic in Puerto Rico, the evangelicals and island politics, and it gets very complicated. What are your takeaways then? I mean, it's 47 days, but what should we know about the rest of the group? Because that is a large group. They're coming from all over, all kind of history. Some of them historically kind of have the Cuban story in a sense, the Venezuelan, some of the Central American groups, families that left left wing, dictatorships, whatever. And then other people that have more, like Dominicans or other South American groups have more of a traditional, leave for economic reasons thing. So what are the dynamics how do we decipher this in the next few months to understand and engage them? And
Ray, I mean, to go back to the Rick Scott piece and the Rubio, I think this is relevant too. I got in a debate with a friend after 2018 because he said about Rick Scott, it was irrational to him that any Puerto Rican voter in Florida would vote for Rick Scott. And, I could see that argument because obviously I'm more aligned. Clearly, I'm very much a Democrat. I'm aligned on the progressive value set. But was it really irrational when you think of the effort that Rick Scott gave in for a Puerto Rican voter to take away the message that when it came time to fighting for Puerto Rico, if that's what you care about, if what you care about is this person going to fight for funding for Puerto Rico and is going to keep the Puerto Rican community in mind as they're making decisions? Was it irrational for somebody to come to that conclusion when they saw Rick Scott go down to Puerto Rico something like 8 times?
That's right.
And that's where campaigning and outreach matters.
And by the way, Senator Nelson ran a horrific campaign across the board. I mean, not just for the Latino piece, but it was, especially poor with Latinos.
Rick Scott clearly ran a better one. I'm going to put it in those terms. Okay. And Republicans in general have understood kind of this piece of it. It's not just about the policy propositions, but it's about showing up.
That's right.
Understand you
have to explain these policy positions because again, the political system in Puerto Rico is different. I mean, there are Democrats and Republicans, but there's other parties. So you just have to, you can't make assumptions. People even understand some of these nuances, especially when they're coming in some cases under, dire circumstances. What else? So what does Biden's team, Democrats, progressives, what needs to be done in Florida, brother, over the next 47 days to maximize Latino Democratic turnout?
Yeah, and so much of, I will say, I think Biden's actually in a good place today when it comes to the Cuban vote and just needs to lock it down and play a little of the defense and maximize what he can get from the under 50 crowd, from the U.S.-born crowd. A lot of the growth is with the Puerto Rican vote and this other category, broader Latin American vote. I think that's where he can really push the margins in a real way. And that means you're competing like hell in Miami. You cannot give up an inch. I mean, that's part of this, right? You have to match dollar for dollar. At this point, I think it's Biden's actually outspending Trump pretty heavily in the Miami market. Needs to keep that up. Needs to do the same in Orlando, and then needs to push hard in places like West Palm that we don't talk about as much, but has a very sizable Mexican American, Colombian,
Guatemalan
population.
Puerto Rican population. My wife, all her family from Long Island relocated to West Palm Beach.
And that, like, you have a Democratic base there, right? You have folks where they are more progressive leaning. And where when you test any kind of messaging, you just say like, hey, let me tell you something, anything about Joe Biden, the numbers go up, right? Some messages better than others, but generally speaking, any communication increases support for Joe Biden because we're operating a deficit. We're months behind in this. So to answer your question, I just think the next piece, this sprint, is an all of the above strategy. There's no one thing. You got to do it all. You have to throw things like efficiency out the window. We care about efficiency because we don't have that much money usually. Joe Biden has tons of money. There's a lot of money moving in the broader funder spheres. And you got to throw out this, like, what's the cost per vote? It's like, nah, bro. Anything you could possibly do to get a Latino vote, you start throwing money at it right now because we don't know what's going to pay off. And we are right now in a war where Donald Trump is waging asymmetrical warfare when it comes to campaigning.
No, and even if it's you talk just throwing money out, just getting the basic information out there about the facts.
Basic information, yeah.
Because right. the some of the nonsense that especially our Spanish speaking voters are getting fed in South Florida is, I mean, it's criminal. And we're talking to Carlos Odio, great political mind, and one of the leaders of Equis Lab that's really cutting edge work, really getting to understand through research, data analysis, and communications what the Latino electorate's about. You hear a lot of, you may see a couple headlines in political, but you really have to delve into the good work that Carlos is doing that we've never really had a space until these last few cycles to really understand. So give us another state that you're looking at, Carlos, you want to note and share your findings. I mean, obviously, Arizona and some of the Southeast states, my home state of Pennsylvania, have Latino populations that can make a difference. Texas in a dream scenario or a best case scenario, but give us another state that you're finding interesting in your research.
Yeah, I'd say, obviously a lot of folks want to talk about Arizona, and I think we just got out of the field in Arizona. We just released some numbers there. I think it makes sense to look at that. The Arizona vote, Biden is doing well. He's trending about where Clinton did. Ideally, he'd actually be exceeding the 70% mark. He's been kind of in the 60s. He needs to get higher to what actually Sinema got in 2018 in her Senate race, where she eked out a victory. And, the two dynamics on one end, you have, as I mentioned, appeal for Trump among younger men. It is especially non-college younger men who,
like with white people, like with his core base. Yeah. Similar demographic.
I mean, people don't understand, like, how could it be? It's like, well, it's because they're operating and occupying the same spaces as the non-college white men who are Trump's base. They're getting the same news. They're consuming the same media. They're on the same Facebook.
They work on the same construction sites with these white guys. They're cops with these white guys. They're in ICE. They're in the military. Let's keep it real.
And so some of that spills over, right? And that there is this very stubborn view of Donald Trump as this, like, great steward of the economy. And it's not because of, like, any particular details, more so than this idea is, like, but he's a businessman, right? He's like an outsider who's going to shake things up.
Shot.
People who, like, listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, and, like, love Elon Musk. It's like all the same. It's all the same thing. Like, they're like, yeah, Trump. Yeah, he's a racist. Let's talk about economic opportunity and, like, what I can create as an entrepreneur. It's like folks who drive Uber but have, like, 3 hustles on the side. Like, you kind of understand somewhat where that appeal comes from, even if I don't agree. But I don't want to lose focus on the fact that where the real growth in the vote can come from is Latinas, right? Latinas are going to save us. Latinas fled the Republican Party en masse, the few that were left there. There's a huge gender divide today, and there's still actually more room for growth in both turnout and support. Latinas turn out at rates lower than non-Latina white and non-Latina Black voters. And so there's running room, right? And when we saw you did any kind of messaging, the numbers still move. That's incredible. You see super high, like 70s plus support for Joe Biden, and you message a little bit about Joe Biden, and it even grows higher. And so that's the dynamic I think we're seeing play out in Arizona, where, again, if the election were today, we'd be fine. If the white support for Biden starts inching closer to what Clinton got, then all of a sudden you're going to need the Latino vote to go up from the point it is at today.
No question about it. You're listening to Carlos Odio, Equis Lab. Carlos, appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much. The last question I have for you, my friend, is give me a lesson of fatherhood in quarantine. Or a story or a nugget, or besides the hair game. It's been a blessing in disguise.
It's a blessing in disguise. Like, I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. I wasn't spending any time with my 1-year-old, just to be honest. We had moved. We both had jobs. She was in childcare and, like, didn't see her. It was truly a blessing that I got to spend as much time with her and got to, like, know this baby that I hadn't gotten to know before. But my biggest takeaway is just, if I didn't know it before, like the role and importance of our support systems, because when we lost it is when you really become grateful for it. When we had no childcare, no daycare, when the grandparents couldn't come over, two parents with jobs, you're just really grateful for the support system that you can have and having the partnership that we had is the only way we were able to survive it.
Carlos, let people know they can follow and keep an eye on the good work that you're doing with Equis Lab.
I recently am starting the Twitter thing, so I've been on Twitter. So a lot of our stuff comes out on
Twitter. Game strong, brother.
I'm trying, brother. It's at Carlos Odio, and then at Equis Research is also where we drop a lot of our leading kind of insights there.
Fantastic. Well, Carlos Odio, thank you so much. You're doing God's work, brother. Thank you. You're teaching me every day with your research and your findings. The Pennsylvania research you did was very illuminating. Confirmed a lot of things we're seeing on the ground, but really gave us some great insights for the good groundwork that we're doing day to day. And you and your family mean a lot to me. Always been very supportive of me and the Found Translation journey. So we'll see each other on the trail, my friend.
Same. Congrats for all the success. Happy to see the podcast, and finally happy to be on with you.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks so much.
Learned it all from you, Ray, in the old days of Democracia. So thanks.
No doubt. Appreciate you, brother. Carlos Odio from Equis Lab. I mean, y'all get a PhD on the Latino vote here on Found Translation Bomba Live. I mean, there's some great information only you can find on our programming here at Bomba Live Found Translation simulcast. And thank our earlier guest, my host, of course, Abe Amoros, breaking down the Pennsylvania dynamics and his political analysis, as well as Federico DeJesus, really our go-to for Puerto Rico policy and issues impacting the island of Puerto Rico from a policy and political perspective. So we've had a great episode. I wanted to end the show by really letting people know that this show was in honor of one of my tios that unfortunately passed away this week. We dedicate this episode to Don William Negron. William Negron was un jíbaro de verdad from Utuado, Puerto Rico, a real Puerto Rican who raised his family in Philadelphia. My titi, Elizabeth Negron, and his children, Michelle and Billy, and their wonderful grandchildren, and very close to me. I grew up in a relatively small nuclear family in Philadelphia with my family, my parents, my one set of grandparents, and Titi Betty and her husband, Don William. So Don William was a good man, worked till he contracted cancer about 6 months ago in his mid-70s, was still working at the airport, just had those real traditional family values, played and just was someone that, played in the church choir probably 60 years and played in traditional Puerto Rican folkloric groups in Philadelphia, and just was a man that walked with God, was very kind, always there for his family. Just solid as a rock, just someone that had those real traditional roots that kept us with his culture, with his spiritual values, his cultural values with music, kept us grounded in our culture. So, Don William, descanse en paz, and we're going to miss you so much. And then, my small way of honoring him at the end of this program is he was a great cuatrista, the Puerto Rican four-stringed tar. Was a great cuatro player, great musician, and someone that's actually going to be on the show to continue that tradition. Fabiola Mendez, a great the next generation of Puerto Rican folkloric musicians, is actually going to be on the show to talk about her music as a cuatro player and a musician and an artist. And she's got a virtual concert coming up that fuses folkloric Puerto Rican music with jazz and other really interesting rhythms. So we're going to play a song of hers, which I think is very appropriate to honor my tío, Don William Negron, who just recently passed away. So this is Fabiola Mendez, a video of hers, Soñando con Puerto Rico, and enjoy the music from Fabiola and her band, and say a little prayer for the Negron family, and enjoy the rest of your weekend here. And again, I know y'all are stressing, but the best way to relieve that stress is to take action and take some control of what we control in the next 47 days, and understand that we are all here to support each other. Thank you so much. Bomba Live, Final Translation Familia. Rest in peace, Don William, and enjoy this performance from Fabiola Mendez.
Si por casualidad duermes y sueñas que te acaricia la brisa y sientes que el rocío mañanero besa tiernamente tu mejilla y el aroma del café te hace cosquillas. Seguro sueñas que estás en Puerto Rico. Si por casualidad duermes y sueñas que te enamoran las olas y que hay un cielo azul en conjura con la luna para hacerte prisionero. No lo digo porque es la tierra que quiero. Seguro sueñas que estás en Puerto Rico. Yo no puedo ocultar el orgullo que siento de ser puertorriqueña. Y es que mi pensamiento, no importa dónde voy, se fuga hacia la islita. No importa dónde voy, a la tierra bendita. Pensamiento, vuela.